Welcome to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. We've heard Warren Buffett say, price is what you pay, value is what you get. How does success and value play out in women's lives? Success is something most of us spend our lives chasing. So why do women who appear to be successful feel like something's missing? And what stops women from achieving success based on their definition of success? Kim Payne is an empowerment coach and runs Nine Rock in Melbourne, Australia. Kim says that value, like a fine wine, is in the eye of the beholder. Welcome to Empowered, Kim. I'm so happy that you're here today.
Oh, Elizabeth, I am so excited not only to talk to you, but to talk about this topic. I feel very, very passionate about it. So super excited.
I know you do, and I know that you are, so let's begin. You've been researching how success and value play out in women's lives for years now. And what have you discovered?
So I've been doing research both around value and around success separately. And then what I started to realize, one of the common threads was how different they are for everyone. And it really comes down to a perception or a belief with both value and success. And when it is a belief or a perception, it makes it really hard, therefore, for people to really know where it plays out in their life and how it plays out in their life. And if I can just explain where this all started from, back when I was 29, I was a financial advisor, and I was sitting opposite a client, an elderly couple, male and female. And while I'm delivering their advice, the woman literally puts her hand up in front of me and says, "Stop. What gives you the right to give me advice? You're young and you're female." And
Wow.
I was floored. Yeah. So I've really spent a lot of time digging deeper. And what I find is a lot of people, when it comes to value and success, not only do they not know what it is, that if a genie came out of a bottle and granted them a wish and waved the magic wand, they wouldn't even know what to ask for in either area. So if you don't know what something is, it makes it very, very difficult to realize if you've achieved it or to actually experience that feeling that you get like success or like something has been valuable. The other thing I find with both as well is what we do end up coming up with is often based off others' conditions or traditions of our past, as opposed to what's really inspiring us and what's intuitive in our own being. So it really becomes a path. And oh my gosh, just like a fine wine, it changes over time as we evolve.
So success is something most of us spend our lives chasing. We want to be successful. We want to be a leader. So why do women who appear to be successful feel like they have something that's missing?
Big part of the reason why people feel like something is missing is they don't have it clearly defined to start with. So if your definition of success is unclear, firstly, then how do you know you've ever reached it? And I work with a bucket load of women who, from the outside, appear really successful. And over time, we'll have conversations or through my research, and they'll say, Kim, there's just got to be more to it than this. And they often say, like, I call it disbelief creep, where you get to a point in your life and you think, how did I get here? Like, I've just been going along, following the wheels and the motion, and I've suddenly ended up in this spot, and it's not where I thought I'd be and not necessarily where I wanted to be. So this goes back to that whole, how did I get here? And there's this thing, what I call the illusion of more, where we're constantly saying, we want more. We know there's got to be more to it, but we don't know what that is. Going back to the whole, if the genie granted you a wish and you didn't know what to ask for, that you've got to get really clear on what more is, what success looks like, what value is, because then it allows you to go, okay, now I'm getting closer to actually achieving it. So I've got a girlfriend who's very, very high up. She works for one of the banks here in Australia. She earns $1 gazillion and has an incredibly fancy title. And she said to me just recently, even though I've got all of these things, Kim, I feel like I'm really missing something, and that making people money might be great, but I feel like there's got to be more meaning to just doing that.
Okay, so when we come back, we're just going to go to have a short commercial break. But when we come back, we're going to delve into more of success and how do we define success. So please don't go away. We'll be right back with Kim Payne. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. On today's episode, we're discussing how courage is the key to success. Now, Kim, before we went to break, you were talking about all these different things, value and success, but how do we actually define success?
So this is the thing, Elizabeth. How we define success is very different for everyone. And probably one of my favorite quotes is by Maya Angelou, who says, success is liking who you are, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. So I like to just substitute the word like for love, because even in my own definition, I want to love who I am, love what I do, and love, how that plays out. So what I've done is, over and throughout all my research, is put together what I call my value thruple, which is a model which is a three-way between who you are, how you live, and what you give, and using this as a foundation for defining success. So I'll go through the three parts of it shortly. But where a lot of, going back to the previous question, where a lot of people, maybe they look successful on the outside, but it's not playing out in their lives, it's typically because they haven't necessarily captured all of these three areas. So they don't know their own self-value. They're not sure or aligning their life to how they're playing out in accordance to their own core values. And they don't really understand fundamentally the value that they then deliver to other people. And it's that gap between, who fundamentally you are, how you live, and what you give, and what society expects. That gap is actually the most crippling part of it. So by having a definition and in these three areas, what I find is it allows people to start closing those gaps so that they can start to work towards not only value, but how they can feel more successful. And it's quite mind-blowing. It is not easy, and it does take time, but it really is a valuable exercise to do. And Elizabeth, so few people do it.
Well, of course, because a lot of people don't think about, work and where they are, and then their personal life and when they are. And you're right, there's a huge gap. So can you please walk me through each section of your value thruple model, starting with identity, please?
Absolutely. So your identity is really who you are. And whenever I'm researching women and success, the first question I ask is, so who are you? And can I tell you, there's only been one person ever that has answered that question immediately and confidently. And it was actually a very, very spiritual person who had a very spiritual answer. Most people can't answer. But when I'm looking at your identity, we're looking at who are you? What makes you tick? What lights you up inside? What is your purpose? What is your why? How do you really want to show up in this world? Your likes, your dislikes, your beliefs. There's a lot to unpacking it. But when you really understand who you are at a core level, and not just a job title or a role. So a lot of people will say, well, I'm a mum, or I'm a lawyer, or I'm, I don't know, a daughter or a sister. These are titles and roles that we play, but they're not who we are at the core. And this is why a lot of people don't do it, because it actually is really hard and it changes over time. So when you can really dig deep, look inside you, because all of this is an inside job, and look at what really makes you tick from the inside out. Define it. And I'm a big person for writing it down. Wow, this is where, this opens up the floodgates to working out your identity and then how that's going to play out in your life. So that's the first part of the model.
So we've got about a minute 30 before we go to break. I want to talk about ideals, because that's part of the thruple model.
Yeah, so ideals is really, this goes back to how are you living your life in accordance to your values? So these are your real core values. And this is not a new concept. This is a concept that's been thrown around forever. But do you know how few people know what their values are? Or even if they know, they don't have them written down, they're not clear, and they don't live by them. But this is the stuff that just takes place. It's your highest priorities in life and the values that you live by. And to be honest, when you're not living by them, when something feels wrong, when someone does something and it agitates you or it frustrates you, it's usually because it's rubbing against your values, and understanding them, having them written down and living them out, it is a deal breaker.
So we have 30 seconds left. Let's talk about impact.
The impact is, what do you do? How do you use your gifts and your challenges, your talents to face challenges and to impact others, to be valuable in other people's lives, either through the work you do, through the roles that you play, or through just showing up as who you are. Most people, when I say, what do you want to do? They say, I want to help people. But what does that really look like? What work gives you meaning? And that whole great resignation that we've all just come off the back of was
Perfect time
people
to go to
wanting.
break. Hold that thought, Kim. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. On today's episode, we're discussing how courage is the key to success. So, Kim, please continue. You were on a roll before we went on to break.
Yeah, so I was talking about impact, which is really around what you do and how you bring your gifts and talents to the table. And this is a really interesting one. I was at dinner with a friend a couple of years ago, and he said to me, Kim, what's your biggest fear? And I said, my biggest fear is that I don't live out my potential. And that's what impact is. It's looking at, what can you do in this world? What is your potential? And how can you bring all of that to the table in your everyday? So it's a really fascinating one. Again, really difficult to do, but when you spend the time getting that clear, it helps dictate the decisions that you make, how you live your life, and who you show up as being.
So, what stops women from achieving success based on their definition?
Oh, wow. So firstly is that their definition is defined by someone else, not themselves. So whether it's been their upbringing, their culture, their background, their family, their friends, all of that, when that becomes our definition, we're not being true to ourselves. And there's a really big gap. I call it the value void between what you're doing and the role that you're playing out and how success feels, and actually what's going on inside you. Or they've got an outdated definition of success, because I don't know about you, Elizabeth, but what I valued and what success was to me even a few years ago is very different to what it looks like today. So without going back and doing that, that means we're living either someone else's definition or an outdated definition, and that stops people. And the number one way that you can get around this is, I call it just making a choice.
Yep.
Making a choice to say, hey, let's spend the time and go back, revisit this. And where do you have to challenge some of what has been conditioned or traditioned in your upbringing or your life? And again, that is not easy. I was talking to a woman just recently, and she was brought up in a country where men really made all the decisions on behalf of women. She's living out here now in Australia and has been for 10 years. But her husband still tells her all the time what she should wear, what colors she should wear, what she's allowed to wear. And she just really stepped back, and it took a lot of courage to turn around and say to him after many years, I want to make my own decisions and my own choices from here on in. And if that doesn't sit with you, we might need to look at calling it quits. And she did that, and it changed everything. Easy again? No. But courageous? Absolutely.
So let's just step on to regret and risk, because as time goes by, a lot of women have a hard time making decisions because they're afraid of taking the risk. So without taking a risk or making a decision, you have regret. How can women move past regret and prevent it from holding them back?
Oh, this is such a good one. And one of my favorite references is The Power of Regret by Daniel Pink. And regret can either hold us back or it can propel us forward. So if you regret something, and typically when we're younger, we regret more of what we've done than what we've not done. As we get older, we regret more of what we haven't done. And when I've interviewed women, there was one woman in particular, she's in her 60s and she's got a business idea that she wants to live out. And I said to her, if you don't do this, albeit she's 60, how is it going to make you feel? And she said to me, Kim, I'd be devastated. And all of a sudden, I didn't need to say anything else. She realized, if I don't do this, not only will I have the regret of it, I will have the devastation that accompanies it. What that did was it operated as an inspiration to actually get her to go and take the next step to go and do that thing. So regret can actually really inform us of what our values are too, or what we value. Because if that regret comes with an emotion of devastation, then it might make you actually go and do that thing that you might not have otherwise done.
Okay, there's a lot to absorb here. There's 30 seconds to commercial. What role does courage play in women's lives?
To me, courage is the secret sauce. And a book called The Lessons of Chemistry, in it, she actually says courage is the root of change. And if you really want to get ahead, in my view, and feel success and feel value, courage is the number one ingredient you need to embrace.
And I think that's really important because this whole concept today, this whole episode has been about courage and making decisions and valuing yourself. And women have a very hard time like charging the proper amount because they don't have a value for themselves. So ladies, please don't go away. We'll be right back with more success and courage in taking risks. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. On today's episode, we're discussing how courage is the key to success. And I'm joined by Kim Payne, a keynote speaker, trainer, and empowerment coach. So, Kim, I've heard you speak about expanding your comfort zone and the importance of it rather than the typical, get out of your comfort zone. What's the difference?
Oh, this might sound like semantics, Elizabeth, but it is so important. I was inspired by a woman called Mel Schilling. Now, she's a psychologist and one of the experts on Married at First Sight. I'm not sure if you have that for
That
those
TV
listeners
show? I've seen
out
it.
there. Yeah. So she wrote a book called The C Word, and the C word is confidence. But in that book, she really talks about expanding your comfort zone. When we think of jumping out of it, firstly, particularly for women, that can be really scary. And if it's too scary, we don't do it. Whereas when you think about it, instead of just jumping out of it, one, and you think of expanding it, it's almost having one foot in and putting one foot out, which gives you that extra layer of support that allows you to still move forward and progress. What I love as well is if you think you're jumping out of it and just say that's your comfort zone, then that's the size. If you think of expanding it, you're actually making it bigger, which means that when you want to go and do that next thing that scares you, that zone that you're operating in, which is your comfort zone, is actually bigger and broader, which means that you can go on and do more as a result. It might be semantics and just a word change, but I find that psychologically, it's been a massive change for women wanting to go and do something and not feeling so unsafe as to just completely jump out, without the life jacket.
I get it because it gives you a sense of stability before you instead of jumping out. You've got one firm foot planted, so you're stable. I've often heard you say as well, everyone has a story, and we talked about that earlier. And everyone has a story to tell that can inspire others. How do we know what our story is?
Oh, Elizabeth, this is such an interesting one because the amount of women I speak to that have done incredible things in their life and say, oh, I don't have a story to tell. Every single person has a story. And going back to courage as well, is most of us don't see the things that we've done in our life as being courageous or anything story worthy. But what we actually find is that the thing that we think is ordinary in one person's life is actually extraordinary or courageous in another's. So if you even look back over your life and your lived experience, there's going to be key moments that have been charged with emotion or moments that you just remember, and they're usually because something is stuck in your mind. It might be something as simple as not getting picked in the sports team, or it might be something really big and traumatic. But if you just sit back and look at your life and all those moments where there's been some sort of memory, a moment, or an emotion attached to it, capture what that event is, put them all in a line, you'll actually start to see that thread line or that through line of the story, which is called your life. And we've all got one.
So it's almost like your mini resume, actually, from your experiences.
Yeah, but of your life, not just your work life. Yeah,
Right.
totally. Totally.
Right.
And it is fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating when you do this work. I love it.
Oh, of course you love it because I can totally see it oozing out of you, and I love it too. So, last question, one last thing that you can suggest we can do to be courageous, and you've got 10 seconds.
Just do one thing. You don't have to go and do that big thing that scares you, but just take one step in that direction, whether it's Googling something, picking up a book, making a phone call, changing a belief. Do one thing, do something, because when you are courageous in one area of your life, it carries over and impacts the rest of it.
Wonderful words of wisdom to live by. Kim, thank you so much for taking all the time out of your schedule. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We all strive for perfection when we're younger, but as we age, we realize that the bar for perfection is a moving target. Forget about perfection and focus on courage. As Kim said, courage is the key to success. She also says that her favorite clients are curious, ambitious professionals who want more from life. Settling is not an option, a theme we've heard often enough here on Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski, and I'm here to empower you and make frugality fashionable. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye for now.